I'm Marcia. The sun beat down on that fateful Sunday afternoon as I stood in my daughter Lily's backyard, the grill smoking and a pitcher of lemonade sweating in my hands. It was Lily's first housewarming, a day I'd dreamt of and sacrificed so much for. Friends and neighbors filled the yard with laughter, and for a brief moment, I allowed myself to relax. But then, my son-in-law Ethan tapped his glass. He had that false, bright smile on his face, the one he thought was charming. As the chatter faded and people turned towards him, Lily stood beside him, smoothing the hem of her dress, oblivious to the storm that was about to break. Ethan raised his beer and started by thanking me for helping them start their life together. I nodded, expecting the usual polite gratitude. Instead, he looked straight at me and said, "So, Mom, when are you bringing your stuff over?" My fingers tightened around the pitcher. A few guests chuckled, thinking it was a joke, but I could tell from his expression that he wasn't joking. He then gestured towards his mother, Victoria, who was already smiling as if a long-planned scheme was finally coming to fruition. "She'll be moving in soon," he added. "No point in her wasting money on rent when we've got the space." The laughter died instantly. Lily's face went pale. Victoria lifted her glass, looking pleased with herself, as if the house I'd bought for Lily had silently become her retirement haven. Standing there in the sweltering heat, I felt something inside me shatter. It wasn't the joy of the moment, it was the trust I'd painstakingly built over the years. That was when I realized my biggest mistake wasn't buying the house, it was trusting the people I'd given the keys to. 3 months earlier, the house was just a quiet promise at the end of a tree-lined street. I remember the first time I stepped inside alone. The air was filled with the faint smell of fresh paint, a scent that carried both hope and exhaustion. Sunlight streamed through the windows, as if blessing the space. I stood there, the realtor's voice fading into the background, thinking about all the long nights I'd worked double shifts at the local factory so that Lily wouldn't have to grow up in the same poverty-stricken environment I did. I hadn't planned to buy a house that day. I'd just driven over to take a look. But as I walked through the small, warm kitchen, I could almost hear the conversations Lily and I would have over cups of hot cocoa. Then I stepped into what would become her bedroom. For a moment, I could picture her in the morning light, pulling on a sweater and humming to herself, just like she used to when she was a little girl. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Tom, my longtime friend. He asked if I'd eaten. I told him where I was, expecting him to scold me for being impulsive. Instead, he said he'd be there in 10 minutes. When he arrived, he stepped into the kitchen beside me, dusting off his work boots. "Good bones," he said, tapping the door frame. "Solid foundation. You won't have to worry about it." I told him I was just looking, but he smiled that gentle smile of his. "You've been looking for ages, Marcia. Maybe it's time you take a chance," he said. I didn't answer right away. I wandered through the hallway, running my hand along the cool banister, thinking about the cramped apartment where Lily had grown up. It was a one-bedroom place with thin walls and noisy neighbors. Lily had never complained. She'd always been so grateful and kind, perhaps too kind for a world that could be so cruel. Tom followed me into the second bedroom. "Stop overthinking," he said. "If you want it, say it out loud." I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the smell of fresh paint. "I want it," I said. That was all it took. The realtor reappeared with papers and numbers. My stomach twisted, as it always did before making a big decision. But I'd lived long enough to recognize when fear was masquerading as practicality. I signed the offer, my hand shaking slightly, and Tom placed his hand over mine. Later that evening, I called Lily. She was at home, working on some projects for her job. Her voice was soft with surprise when I told her I'd put an offer on a house for her. "Mom, you don't have to do this," she said. "I know," I replied. "But I want to. You deserve a better life." She started to cry quietly on the phone, and I held back my own tears as I looked at the stack of mortgage documents in front of me. I'd promised myself a long time ago that Lily would have opportunities one never had. This house was part of that promise. A week later, after the inspection was clear, Tom and I sat in a small office with a real estate attorney. The attorney explained the property laws, how a pre-marriage gift remained separate property, and how adding names to the deed could change its protection. I listened intently, storing every word in my mind, just like I used to remember factory production schedules. The attorney then pushed a folder towards me and said, "If you want your daughter to have real security, transfer the house to her name before the wedding. No shared title, no obligation to her spouse. It'll keep things simple." I nodded and looked at Tom. He gave me a small, approving nod, as if to say he knew I'd understood everything already. On the drive home, as the evening settled over the neighborhood, I felt a strange mix of peace and unease. I knew I was doing the right thing, but I also knew that giving someone security could sometimes reveal who resented not having it. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about my late husband's words. He'd once told me that Lily would grow up to be stronger than both of us combined. I hoped he was right, because I was starting to realize that strength wasn't just about getting through tough times, it was about standing up for what you believed in, even when those you loved tried to take it away. The day Lily asked me to meet Ethan's family, I was filled with a quiet hope. I smoothed the wrinkles out of my dress twice before leaving the house. I didn't expect perfection, just kindness. Ethan suggested dinner at a cozy French bistro near the park. It was a place with soft lighting and a warm atmosphere. When I walked in, Lily waved me over, her face beaming. Ethan stood up to hug me and then introduced me to Victoria. Victoria had an overbearing presence. Her perfume was strong and floral, and her smile seemed forced. She took my hand gently and said she'd been looking forward to meeting me. I believed her, though I couldn't quite put my finger on why. Throughout dinner, I watched her closely. She reminded me of some of the factory bosses I'd dealt with over the years, polite on the surface but controlling. Every time Ethan spoke, Victoria would look at him as if she was waiting to correct him. When Lily mentioned that she'd like to live close to her work, Victoria leaned forward and said, "Well, you two could always move into my apartment complex. There's a nice unit available." Ethan chuckled nervously and said, "Mom, we've talked about this. We want our own place." Victoria's smile faltered for a moment but then returned. "Of course, I was just thinking of what's practical," she said. I took a sip of my water, feeling a sense of unease. Lily reached for her fork and gave me a look, letting me know she felt it too. As the conversation turned to wedding plans, Victoria's hand kept finding Ethan's arm, patting it possessively. When Lily mentioned that she wanted a small, intimate wedding, Victoria started suggesting large venues, expensive caterers, and elaborate color schemes, none of which were what Lily wanted. Ethan tried to laugh it off, but I could see Lily shrinking a little more with each suggestion. When the server cleared our plates and dessert arrived, I excused myself to the restroom. On my way back, I heard Victoria say in a soft, almost sad voice, "I don't know what I'd do if Ethan ever lived far away. He's my whole world." Her tone was manipulative, like she was trying to plant guilt. I'd heard that tone before, in the factory when bosses tried to pressure workers. When she saw me return, she sat up straight and asked, "More coffee, Marcia?" I nodded and sat down, feeling Lily's hand brush mine under the table. It was her way of saying she saw what was going on. After dinner, we stepped outside into the cool night air. The park lights were on, and the trees swayed gently in the breeze. Lily and Ethan walked ahead, holding hands. Victoria lingered beside me. "Ethan's a good boy," she said softly. "He's always taken care of me. I'm afraid I'll lose him when he gets married." I didn't know how to respond. There was a sense of desperation in her words. When Ethan came back from the parking meter, Victoria quickly brightened up and looped her arm through his. "Ready, dear?" she asked. Ethan nodded, but I could see the discomfort on his face. It was a small truth he hadn't yet admitted to himself. Driving home that night, I couldn't stop thinking about Victoria's words. I didn't dislike her, but I knew there was trouble ahead. I had a feeling that the house I'd bought for Lily, my dream of a safe haven for her, might become a battlefield. When the house was finally mine and the keys were in my hand, I drove straight there after work. The keys were still warm from the attorney's office. The sky was a beautiful shade of orange, and the neighborhood looked peaceful. I walked through each empty room, listening to the sound of my footsteps echoing. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I'd done something right. A few days later, I invited Lily to see the house. She arrived with a bouquet of flowers and her eyes were shining. When she stepped inside, she stopped in her tracks, as if she'd entered a magical place. "Mom, it's amazing," she whispered. She walked from room to room, touching everything, opening closets, and running her fingers along the kitchen counters. When she reached the back patio, she opened the sliding door and stepped out, letting the breeze blow through her hair. I waited until she turned to me and then told her the truth. "This house will be yours before the wedding. I've already started the paperwork. No matter what happens in life, you'll always have a place of your own." Her breath caught, and the flowers in her hand trembled. "Why would you do this, Mom?" she asked. "Because you deserve to be safe," I said. "Life is unpredictable, and I want you to have something that no one can take away." She hugged me tightly, her shoulders shaking with tears. For a moment, everything felt perfect. It was the kind of peace I'd always hoped for as a mother. 2 days later, Ethan asked to see the house. He showed up with a 6-pack of soda and a polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. Lily walked him through each room, her voice full of pride. I hung back, watching him closely. His eyes lingered a little too long on the extra bedrooms. "This is really generous of you, Mom," he said finally. "You didn't have to do all this." "I know," I replied. "But I want Lily to start her marriage with a solid foundation." It was just the beginning of a battle. When Lily and Ethan left for their honeymoon, I spent the 2 weeks getting the house in order. Tom helped me assemble furniture, lay rugs, and fix the leaky faucet. We worked slowly, paying attention to every detail, as if we were building a future for Lily. The morning before the housewarming, Victoria showed up again, unannounced. She was carrying a large bag filled with decorative items and some old family photos. She was already spreading a throw over the couch when I stopped her. "This needs to wait," I said gently. "Lily hasn't seen the finished house yet." "I'm just helping," she insisted, walking towards the kitchen as if she owned the place. "You've done your part. I'm doing mine." I stepped in front of her and said, "This isn't about parts. This is Lily's home. She gets to decide." Her expression hardened, but then I saw a brief moment of loneliness in her eyes. It passed quickly, and she put on her defensive smile. She gathered her things and left, but I knew she'd be back. And she was. At the barbecue the next afternoon, just as I was setting down the last tray of drinks, Ethan tapped his glass. His voice was confident as he said, "So, Mom, when are you bringing your stuff over?" The words hit me like a punch. The laughter in the yard died down. Victoria lifted her chin, looking smug. Lily's face went white. Ethan continued, "It makes sense for her to move in. We've got the space." I stepped forward because Lily was too shocked to speak. "This house isn't ready for another resident, and the deed is already in Lily's name," I said calmly. Victoria let out a bitter laugh. "You're so controlling, hiding behind your so-called generosity," she said. "It's not control," I replied. "It's protection. Any mother would understand that." Ethan's jaw tightened. "So, you think I'm after a free house?" he asked. "I think you haven't thought this through," I answered. Finally, Lily found her voice. "Ethan, you made this decision without me and then announced it like it was a gift," she said, her voice trembling but clear. That's when Victoria placed a hand dramatically on her chest and swayed a little, trying to gain everyone's sympathy. I can't handle being unwelcome in my own family, she gasped. I'd seen this act before. I stepped closer and said, no one here is your enemy, Victoria. But you can't just take over Lily's home. Her eyes hardened, and she clung to Ethan as if he was her only lifeline. They left soon after, leaving a trail of tension behind them. In the following weeks, the silence between Lily and Ethan forced him to face the truth. He started going to therapy, and slowly, he began to break free from his mother's hold. When he finally came back, he came with sincerity, not demands. Lily chose to forgive him, not out of fear, but because she knew her own worth. Now, the house stands as a symbol of her strength, and I've learned that the most powerful word a woman can say is no.